Welcome back to Common Ground and Inside Look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Sheriff Steve Tompkins. Now, my next guest is a gentleman that I met, maybe 12 years ago, 11, 12 years ago. And that's when my predecessor, Sheriff Cabral, who is now Secretary Cabral, there was this discussion about whether or not she was going to switch parties from the Republican Party to go to the Democratic Party. And she had a conversation with Senator Kennedy. And his right-hand guy was the gentleman sitting next to me, Mr. Steve Kerrigan. And I must say this in full disclosure and all candor. I thought that he handled the situation and he handled my prior boss in such an admirable way that I've got nothing but respect for this young man. Steve, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sheriff.
We really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you very much.
I know it's crazy out there, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna just delve right into the issues. Let's begin with education. Yeah. That's one of the big burning issues of the day. Where do you come down on education, and how would you introduce, as a Lieutenant Governor, or work to introduce parity across the Commonwealth, the towns, and the city for our public school children?
Sure. First of all, everybody knows this, and so therefore every politician's probably said it sitting in this chair, but a well-educated child is the biggest economic development tool we have. And so we've got to look at it from every angle. But I frankly think a couple of quick things. Education reform, which was done 21 years ago, which I joke all the time now shouldn't be called education reform because it's 21 years old, needs to be looked at. The foundation formula, how we pit communities against each other in terms of what they're able to pay because of the foundation formula needs to be adjusted. It's only been looked at 3 times in 21 years, and it was supposed to be looked at every 2 years. So that's got to be reviewed. We've got to invest, no doubt, in early childhood education. That one of the best things to closing the achievement gap is early childhood education and making sure that the right resources are getting to the right schools. Early childhood education doesn't just give them an opportunity then and a lifetime of better learning opportunities, but it's proven that increases home ownership in the long run, reduces violence, reduces crime rates, and increases income levels across the board, those who have that opportunity. So it's not just about making sure the kid at the time has an opportunity to advance. It's about a lifetime of progress that comes from that one moment. And that will help. We also need to invest in ways that get folks and teachers to want to teach in communities that need the support. And we need to be very clear that it's a much different scenario there and give them the incentives to do that. And also find ways to provide for classes for English as a second language, which there's been cuts in those resources, and that's a real shame, and we've got to be more responsive to that. In a city like Boston, where I think over 140 languages are spoken in the public schools, we have to be there for those kids. Every child, every person learns differently, and we need an education system that is flexible and can adjust to that and make sure that everybody has an opportunity.
Where do you come down on charter schools?
So on charter schools, I have sort of 3 points on charter schools. When they first came out, great idea. Laboratory for learning, we're supposed to get all this great insight and information. And in some urban and some disadvantaged communities, they were supposed to be this great opportunity, and they are in some ways. The problem is we haven't necessarily gotten the data from them back to the district education. So it was supposed to be this great experiment, and we were supposed to get the new tools so we could put them to district ed because we were using public dollars to fund these. That's my other concern, is the public dollars. We see all the time that we're pitting district ed against charter schools when all those parents and the teachers really want to do is make sure the kids gets a good education. To my earlier point, everyone does learn differently, so we do have to give people opportunities. My real concern, though, is that we do so at the expense of district ed and the expense of the pledge that we made when we had our Constitution in 1780 to give everybody a public education here in Massachusetts. So I have significant concerns relative to that, and that's really why I'm a little bit concerned about charter schools because of that. I do think they can provide great opportunity, but we've got to fix some of the issues. And the final point I'll make on it is, particularly in a number of communities here in Massachusetts, they're supposed to be representative of the community that they're in, and oftentimes they aren't in the end. They might be right when they open, but in the end they aren't, and they're not reflective of the community that they represent. And if we're using public dollars, we need to provide an opportunity across the board.
It's a two-part question. I'm a trustee at Roxbury Community College, and what we find is a lot of the students that come in straight from high school need to go into remedial classes before they can get college-level classes. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on two fronts. One, community colleges, period, and using those as an incubator or training center for growth, education growth, and whether or not the high schools and the junior colleges should work in tandem prior to kids leaving high school, moving on to community colleges.
So first of all, community colleges, I think, and particularly in Massachusetts, are an unsung hero in our education system. Because not only are they helping those who can't afford to go to a four-year school or whatever it is, or want a specific type of education. But they're also, the average age, at least there was last year, the average age of a community college student in Massachusetts is 29 years old. You know, so it's not necessarily just the folks who come straight out of school. And they need that opportunity because, again, everybody learns differently. I do think that coordination at all levels of education is critical to make sure that if, not just if they're graduating without the right skills, which they shouldn't, but if we're seeing a trend like that, that we can address it on the early side, so that if a community college is starting to see that a number of folks coming out of one particular community are showing up there with need for remedial education classes, we need to talk about that. And we need to then go back to that district and say, why is that? Why are you producing these students in this way? And what sort of help do you need? Not slap your wrist, but what help do you need to make sure you're not doing that? So the communication needs to be across the board. And then, you know, we do need also make sure that, and we've been doing a lot better job of this in the last few years, and Governor Patrick deserves a lot of credit for this, of pairing up community colleges with the economy. To make sure that we're giving these folks a chance to not just go to college, but get a job when they're done, and that they're getting the skills that they need across Massachusetts to be able to help in the economy. And
when you talk about skills, what do you think about vocational education?
I think it's remarkable to note that the President of the United States is giving one high school commencement address this year, and it is at Worcester Vocational Technical School.
I did not know that.
In a couple of weeks.
I did not know that.
The principal of the year for the United States of America was the principal of Worcester Voc. And I think that's telling, because it's showing that, you know, when I was a much younger man, and really sort of post-World War II, the American dream wasn't just own a house, but it was go to a four-year school.
That's right.
You know, that's not necessary for everybody. And I think we need to understand that that vocational technical schools not only are an amazing opportunity for folks to get skills that we need in the workforce, but it's a really great opportunity for folks to feel great value in themselves. You know, when I was a kid going to high school, the kids going to the Voc schools, it was as if that was the path they were taking, and they weren't going to go this way. And it was sort of not even a little bit looked down upon. All of them, everyone I know who went to Voc Tech school, now is a plumber who probably makes a lot more than I'll ever make in my life.
Right. You know, they've got the boat and the two cars out back. Yeah, no, believe me. I grew up in New York City, and I remember vocational high schools that were just vocational in nature, you know, automotive and printing and other schools. And you're right; those guys and ladies did quite well for themselves. Last time I had a carpenter at my house, they walked away with a pretty penny.
Of course,
you know. So I want to shift gears to the economy and jobs. Two-part question again. One, how would you keep the businesses that are presently in the Commonwealth? How do you keep them here so that they don't cross our borders or go elsewhere? And then the second part of that question is, how do you inspire new business growth within the Commonwealth, or to attract businesses from other states? Let's start with, how do we keep the business that we have here?
So I think my answer is going to cover both, but we'll see if I don't push me. The first thing I want the next governor to do, the governor-elect, to appoint me the day after the election, not the day after the inauguration, the day after the election, to chair a competitiveness council. Because I think we are very competitive on the world stage, but we can do a lot better. And we can do a lot better in terms of really small businesses and communities, and we can do better with large businesses. But we've got to look at every aspect of life in Massachusetts. Correctional facilities. We've got to look at business regulations and how people grow. I know a guy who's opened 4 coffee shops in 4 communities in Massachusetts, and he said it might as well have been 4 countries. We've got to make it easier. Early childhood education is a facet to make us more competitive. More cultural and arts investment will make us more competitive. Closing the achievement gap will make us more competitive. Reducing health, all those things will make us more competitive. And that way, folks want to stay here. People who live here, they live here for a reason because they love New England. Yes, it's cold, We've got our own, but it's a wonderful, rich part of our country, and they want to stay here, and they want us to make it easier for them to do it. We've got to do it. It's not necessarily through tax credits, because I think one of the things we have to look at through the Competitiveness Council is the tax credit system, because I don't think it's working. I think folks are getting a lot of tax credits and incentives, not delivering on their end of the bargain, using tax privacy laws to say that they're not going to reveal whether or not they've hired the number of people. In that case, I say we execute the clawback provision, take those resources back, and put them back toward the social safety net and other programs that will also, by the way, make us more competitive. When we have a strong DCF and a strong Department of Transportation, all those things, when we have all those things working, when government works for people, that makes us more competitive, and people want to grow a business here and stay here.
What would you do about, when you talk about keeping people here, folks that want to stay here? A lot of times I've talked to folks, they can't afford to live here, and a lot of it is around housing. How do you grow more low income and moderate income housing to keep those folks, that middle class that's vanishing real quick? How do you keep those folks in the Commonwealth?
So a few things.
Through housing.
Of course, So a few things. I mean, I do think smart growth around transportation hubs is critical to make sure that folks who, because oftentimes those are folks who don't have a car, or don't have two cars, and they're a two-income family. So we've got to provide more smart growth around, but we've also got to provide the transportation. We've got to, and this may be heresy to say in Boston, but we've got to stop having a mass transit system that only feeds to Boston. We've got to have ability for folks to move between Amherst and Northampton and Springfield, and be able to move between Pittsfield and Springfield, and be able to move between Fitchburg and Worcester. And you've got to have that flexibility, but also enhanced movements to Boston and in and out of Boston. South Coast Rail needs to be done in the next administration. And there was just a piece done the other day about high-speed rail from Springfield, which would take 90 minutes, which you can actually get. There's only one train from Springfield to the city of Boston every day. There are 5 from Portland, Maine. It's just about priorities and about making sure. But back to the housing thing, we have to look at not only affordable housing, we have to make some adjustments. Some communities, not cities, some smaller towns, use their elder housing as their affordable housing allocation, and they get out of adding any more. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. And frankly, one of my communities is one of them. We also need to build up more workforce housing. So folks in that $40,000 a year range who have a couple of kids and they're just trying to make their way in the world, we've got to create that category. So that, number one, we free up more affordable housing by taking care of the senior housing part, but also build up some more workforce housing. And that, again, will have to be clustered around transit sites and things like that. But I think that we can do it, and we can do it fairly effectively in the next 4 years.
So the interesting thing about any legislative body is how they work in tandem, how they work together to provide the services that you're talking about. And one of the things that gives me pause sometimes when I think about it is, take the interstate highway system, take Medicaid or Medicare. Say we tried to introduce that today. I don't know that we'd be able to get it through. As Lieutenant Governor, how do you work within the State House to work with those different groups to say, come on, guys and ladies, I mean, we've really got to do what needs to get done to take care of folks. How do you do that?
I think we're uniquely timed for that now. My old boss, Senator Kennedy, used to say all the time, a lot of great things can get done if nobody cares who gets the credit. There's too often that's the focus.
That's a good one.
And I talked to a legislator about Chapter 90 money, which is the local roads and bridges money, and he said that the reason why there isn't more, because to me that would be an easy one, right? Just increase that and let your cities and towns. And he said the reason why is that some legislators are worried that they're not going to get the credit for it, that the mayors or the city councils will get credit for it. So, I think we've got to find a way first to focus on the larger picture. But I think the level of frustration that exists in this country and in this Commonwealth right now with government and politics is why we're so primed to get things done, frankly. I know it's the cynical mind would say, oh, well, it's the opposite. I really do think, this is why I'm in this race, because I got frustrated too. I almost walked away from politics, as I think I've told you. And then I realized, God, if I'm this frustrated, what must the average everyday voter who's not as into the politics as I am think? And I think this is a unique opportunity. Folks get elected to make a difference for the most part. Some get elected to run for re-election, but
we don't know.
We don't know any of those guys. But most of them get elected to make a difference, and that's we've got to put what's at stake, and that's why this Competitiveness Council will be key. We'll talk about really the vision and the future and what we hold as our Commonwealth's identity for the next 25 years. And we've got to have that conversation. There are some things the government's offering right now that we may not be able to offer. But we've got, folks talk all the time about early childhood education or other things, and they say there's not enough money. They're looking at passing a $36 billion budget, a third of which is caught up in fixed costs and other things.
Right.
There's $36 billion. There's money.
Right.
It's just a matter of how you allocate it and what your priorities are. And that's what a budget is. But we've got to get folks together. You have to start on day one working with the legislature, working with local elected officials. I've been honored to be endorsed by 9 mayors across the Commonwealth and lots of other local elected officials. I've also been honored to be endorsed by 7 state senators and 24 House members who understand that my entire career has been about solving problems and getting things done and bringing people together to do that around common goals. And that's what I want to do as Lieutenant Governor. I think that's a key role that I can play for the next governor.
Then talk to us about where you come down on healthcare and how you get affordable, if such a thing exists, really, affordable healthcare to folks in the Commonwealth where it's not taking from Peter to pay Paul and hurt somebody else.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think what we're seeing, and this is this may not be very clear, but the Affordable Care Act is working. The website's not. There's lots of aspects of it that are incredibly frustrating. But if you think about it, and my old boss for 47 years fought for universal health care. So this thing's been on the books trying this thing for 100 years. We've done it. We've just got to be patient with it. And we've got to push it and make it better each and every day. But it's working. So I don't really want us to move away from that. To be quite honest, I'm on the Health Connector because I'm campaigning full time. And I saw, when we implemented and switched over to ACA, I saw a $130 a month reduction in my premiums. And I know that's the case for families all across the Commonwealth and the country. So we've got to make that work. In the next couple of years, costs will start going down as ACA is fully implemented. Obviously, the cost itself is a big concern. I probably would have done, if I were governor at the time, I probably would have done what Governor Patrick did, which was ask for a waiver from ACA. We didn't get it. No one was ever going to get it because you couldn't risk breaking up the pie there. But I do think we can focus on making sure that ACA is fully implemented. And then we cover the accessibility part, and then we can start drawing down costs. The purchasing power stuff is going to be a critical component too to driving down costs. But you'll see costs go down because the more people are covered, the more they go for preventative care, the less emergency room care we're going to have to deal with, things like that.
That's right.
We've got to stay focused on fully implementing ACA and be patient with it, as frustrating as that can be. What we should not be patient with is a government problems like the web page and things like that. We should never be patient with that, and we should always make sure that those who we contract with to do a job do it right. That's what people want. They want a government that when they say they're going to do something, they do it.
Right. So as Lieutenant Governor working with the governor, what do you say to the insurance companies about healthcare?
Yeah, well, that we're all in this together, and that we've got to find ways to keep costs as low as possible. We've got to work with the federal government and the delegation to make sure that our Medicaid reimbursements rates are what they need to be. And I remember many years working with Senator Kennedy and whoever the governor was to push for waivers on some aspects of Medicaid. We've got to continue to do those things. I mean, it has to be an all or nothing approach. And the insurers who not only insure folks here, but they work here and they live here. They're a big part of the solution, and we've got to get them to the table to talk about the overall stuff. But it really has got to be everybody focused on cost controls, bringing down the cost. The administrative costs are absolutely outrageous, and we've got to draw those costs down. I'm not one who believes that switching over to single payer is the right thing to do. I do think there are some inefficiencies in how we administer our system, but we can find those and we can fix those, and we have to.
So when you talk about costs, I want to just shift gears now and talk about public safety real quick. When you look at $46,000 to incarcerate versus say $13,000 to $20,000 to educate, when you talk about a nation and a state that frankly incarcerates a lot of people, nation that incarcerates more people than any nation on the planet, it just costs too much. We can no longer afford to warehouse people. We have to correct situations and send these folks back home. As a Lieutenant Governor, how do you work on that issue of public safety and keeping folks out of an incarceration facility like mine? Well, let me give you this statistic, and I'm sure you know it. 85%, at least on the county level, 85% of the folks that are with me are there because of some involvement with substance abuse. 42% present with some form of mental illness. Okay, so these are folks that should be in a detox bed or a mental health bed. Or we should have diversionary programs where we get in front of sending folks to jail. How do you work with that?
First and quickly, mental health has to be treated like health. Just has to be treated like health. And I'm glad it's such a focus of the governor's race right now, because it has to be. It can no longer be stigmatized, because when it is, folks don't get the treatment that they need, and problems happen for them and for others. Substance abuse is also a critical thing. We've got a couple quick things. We have to look at mandatory minimums, because we're giving you guys way too many people. Way too many people. And it's unfair and it's inappropriate for you and for those who are incarcerated. And we have to, in place of that, I'm not saying slap them on the wrist and send them on their way, but do programs with them to make sure that they're getting the treatment and help that they need, rather than being put into jail. We also have to look at the diversionary programs in communities, but also we've got to look at, if you look at the rates when we had community policing and the COPS grants in Massachusetts and in the country, crime rates were all down, the incarceration rates were down, everything was down, because you had more folks in the community talking with each other. Hey, that guy's a bad guy, let's, or that guy's going down the wrong path. Let's correct it. And that's the thing, is that we don't have the resources anymore. I would like to see the federal government reinvest in programs like that. I'd like to see them give the state an opportunity, because the states can't do it all by themselves, but I'd like to see a collective effort, but it needs to be a discussion across the board. And criminal justice reform doesn't do any good if we don't include sheriffs, DAs, defense bar, doctors of all stripes, mental health, behavioral health, clinical care, other things, judges, probation officers, teachers. Everybody has to be around the discussion. You can't just say, here's one fix to the criminal justice system and it's going to get fixed. It's not going to happen. It may make you feel real good that day, or you may throw more money at a problem, but until we have that holistic approach and discussion and overall solutions, we're not going to solve it.
In fact, I use that word holistic a lot when talking about this issue, because I agree with you. It does have to be a collective. We have to bring everybody into the mix. And when you talk about, the minimum mandatory sentencing, I do believe that we need to give the ability for the judges, put that back in their hands to make the determination as to whether or not a person should go away for 5 months or 15 years. You see, but when you have these hard and fast rules, it gets way out of whack, And so I agree with you, Steve, that we really do need to look at this in a very holistic way. Casinos. Okay, one of the issues that is just like, oh my God.
Are you sure we're not out of time?
Right, exactly. That could be a show in and of itself. So there was all the big, hullabaloo about whether or not we're going to get them, whether we should have them, blah, blah, blah. And now we're at this impasse, okay? It's taking quite some time. I understand the transparency, and I understand the need to make sure we do this the right way. But where do you come down on having casinos in the Commonwealth?
So I was never a fan of casinos. I mean, I've been to them. I was never a fan of them being a solution here in Massachusetts. When they were proposed, I wasn't an elected officer or seeking it, but I would have much preferred a one casino solution to the situation. I was in the Attorney General's office at the time, and we did push for strong law enforcement components and to make sure that there were protections there as best we could. The bill got passed after we left office, but I would rather not have 3 casinos, slot parlor, potential for a tribe to do a casino as well. That being said, the law passed. It was a very deliberative process. The law passed by our elected representatives, and we're implementing it. Now, are we implementing it quickly? No. Are we implementing it without flaws? No. Do I believe that everybody involved in the process is being honest and earnest? Do I take them at their word? Yeah. They're good people. And Steve Crosby I've known for a long time. He's a good man. He's a very good man. And so, I'd like to see it play out a little bit more. There are cities and towns. I mean, the law is working to some extent. You gave cities an opportunity and towns to vote. All the smaller communities who didn't want them voted them out. Places like Springfield and Everett and Revere voted them in. And I, sort of can't help but think of someone who was out in Springfield who said to me, I don't understand that if we voted for it, why 350 other towns get a chance to tell us no? Now, is it going to be the huge economic boon that people said it was going to be? Probably not. Will it help? Probably. But I do think that there's some element where a city like Springfield or Revere or Everett should be given their shot.
So we've only got about a minute and a half left. What I'd like you to tell the folks out there is, what's the reason that they should consider giving you their vote to be the next Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth?
You know, I tell folks all the time, I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I believe that government needs to get back in the business of solving problems. Throughout my entire career as a local elected official in my town, working for the Attorney General, helping to run the largest public law office in New England, running 2 national political conventions, working for Senator Ted Kennedy for 14 years, and running a small nonprofit called the Mass Military Heroes Fund, which supports families of fallen service members. My entire career has been about solving problems. That's what we need now in government. We need a government that is focused on making everything work for our citizens. We need a government that's responsive to the voters. We need a government that believes in the true sacrifice that taxpayers make each and every day. I've seen it in government each and every day. We've made real good improvements in my career in 25 years in public life to make people's lives better. That's what I want to do as Lieutenant Governor. I sensed the frustration a lot of people were feeling, and that's why I got in this race, because I believe government can play a powerful role in people's lives. But it matters who's doing it. It matters that you have the right folks in there. I think I can be a powerful partner for the next governor. I know I can be. But if once I win this primary and we're a ticket in November, there's nothing more important to me than winning in November to make sure that someone like Karen Polito does not get the job of Lieutenant Governor. There's too much at stake, and frankly, and even Charlie Baker, who has served our Commonwealth, but we got to look back at what he did when he served our Commonwealth. When he was Secretary of HHS, he started the draconian cuts of DCF and all the social services programs. I mean, you look at the budgets that were done in the late Dukakis years to now. Social services, which is a root of almost every one of the questions that we talked about today. The cuts in those budgets really draw a direct line to some of the problems that we're facing right now, and we need to get a government back that actually solves people's problems and is in the business of creating jobs and making our Commonwealth shine the way it needs to be.
And in 15 seconds, tell us, what's the experience like going across the Commonwealth and meeting and talking to all of the folks that you've met?
It's amazing. It really is. You know, I've been all over the Commonwealth my whole career, but doing it for myself and talking to voters about my vision, it's different. You know, it's a lot more freeing too, because I can come to something like this and answer your questions and have a conversation without thinking about
what would my boss say?
What would my boss say? Yeah.
Right.
You know, and the impact that might have on he or she. You know,
That's right.
It's liberating. I love it. I think I will love governing more than I love campaigning.
I'll share your pain there, brother.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right.
But I'm looking forward to. I love the campaign though. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, well, listen, thanks for taking the time. I know it's crazy running back and forth, but thanks for taking the time to come to talk to us and talk to our viewers so they get a real good insight into who Steve Kerrigan is.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Godspeed.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, folks, that's it for today's show. We're out of time. We're out of here. We'll be back again next week. And so until then, you take care of yourself. Peace.